If you could please find your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the Governor of Queensland, Her Excellency, the Honourable Dr. Jeannette Young, PSM. Thank you. You may be seated. We'll go shortly to a live stream from the Ndambi room upstairs for a welcome to country from Tribal Experiences, which will happen shortly.
Welcome. For those who don't know me, my name is Bundamba Ya. It's a Yagara language name that I've earned, and translated from Yagara direct to English means battle axe belonging to Yah, the Hebrew name of the Creator. I'm also known as Thomas of the Cogill family and Thomas of the Bonner family, and I'm a descendant of the Yagara language speaking nation. I'm a descendant of the Yagara language speaking nation through two tribes or two separate family lineages. On my father's side, we can trace our ancestry back to Mulgrave, who was a patriarchal warrior in the 1800s era, who roamed the plains from Ipswich to the foothills of Toowoomba and Warwick. One of his descendants is my direct great-grandfather, Senator Neville Bonner. He was the first Aboriginal Senator of Australia, and he identified as a Jagera man, which is Western Yagara. On my mother's side, I'm a descendant of Grandfather Mookin. Grandfather Mookin is the patriarchal ancestor of the Mortons. Grandfather Mookin was initiated a Yagara man, and he also was the last message stick carrier for the Yagara language speaking nation. That's what qualifies me to speak here on country. Welcome to country in this area. Prior to settlement, we used to have a lot of festivals, two that come to mind. The Undercull Festival held on North Stradbroke Island, Manduraba, and also the Bunyannut Festival held in Cubby Country, where the Glasshouse Mountains is. It was by invite only. Those tribes that were invited to it, they would send forth their message stick carrier, ask for permission, and then we would welcome them into country. Yagara country, it extends from the mouth of the Brisbane River. We know it as Maiwa. It has two central locations of gathering points. On the north banks of the river, where we stand today, is Meanjin. Meanjin means the spike of the spear, or the tip of the spear. Our second gathering point is Kurilpa. It means the place of the water rat, and it essentially goes from the Kangaroo Point Cliffs all the way down to Davies Park at West End. You follow the Brisbane River down to the Bremer and down to Ipswich, and then the plains out to the foothills of Toowoomba and Warwick, and that's our western border. Our southern border is the Logan River itself, which starts at Bow Desert, goes through Logan, parts of Logan, and our traditional name for Logan is Birrimba. It means dwelling place of the south. You follow the Logan River out to the bay, Quandamuka, also known as Moreton Bay. In our language, we call it Quandamuka, and it means dolphin storm, and there's a Dreamtime story that's attached to that area that developed that landscape. Our northern borders is the Caboolture River, Kabul meaning carpet snake and Cha meaning belonging to. We have the Turrbal Ndambi connection. These are northern clans of the Yagara language speaking nation. Yagara language, our neighbouring language speaking nations to the north, Caboolture River, is the Cubby Cubby. West is the Toowoomba and Warwick, foothills of Toowoomba and Warwick is the Waka Waka. South for the Logan River is the Yugambeh, and also the bay itself, the Jandai language speaking nation. Yagara would like to also acknowledge the Torres Strait Islander community here living in Yagara Jarrah, and also the South Sea Islander community here living in Yagara Jarrah. In the words of the old tongue, I'd like to welcome you here on behalf of the Yagara language speaking nation is Yira Yira, Nambale Ganare Bajara, Nane Yagara Nuro, which means hello and welcome. I welcome you, and also the good Nuro. Uncle Jono is just going to play a little bit of this didgeridoo to also make you feel welcome here, and also just a moment to reflect for Reconciliation Week, some of us that aren't here today. Welcome to Yagara country. Yurda. Yurda, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Tommy and Tribal Experiences Dance Group for welcoming us to country. I pay my respects to his elders, past, present and emerging, and extend my respects to those Aboriginal and Torres Islanders that join us here today in the room and online across the state. Welcome to Her Excellency, the Honourable Dr. Jeannette Young, PSM, to the Speaker, Ministers and Members of Parliament, our judicial guests, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Kapu migi batainga, Debi dim wabim, saunapa mayam. Good morning to you all and welcome to Reconciliation, Queensland's National Reconciliation Week breakfast, which is proudly sponsored by BHP. The National Reconciliation theme this year is Be Brave, Make Change. While tomorrow we kick off National Reconciliation Week for 2022, today is National Sorry Day. I'd like us to take a moment now to reflect on National Sorry Day and pay our respect to those affected in the past, stolen generations, to those being affected today. And the fact that there are more children that have been removed since before the apology. Reflect on this year's theme, Be Brave, Make Change. Because this is clearly something that needs to change. My name is Leon Filewood. My mob are the Ugaramle, Stephen Island in the east of the Torres Strait, the Mualgal, people from Mu Island in the west of the Torres Strait, and my Aboriginal ancestry comes from the Kugialanji, Girramay, and North Queensland Cowboys. Go the Cowboys. Sorry, Mel, when Ninga's sitting over there. Sorry, Mel. I'm a proud black fella. I'm a proud black fella, but I'll tell you now, it's really hard being a proud black fella when you're brown and look like an Indian brother. I had a moment last week, I had to go up to Cairns. I live in Sydney now. I had to go up to Cairns for work. And I was walking down the street looking like a tourist, had my work bag and a port, going heading to the office from the airport. And I walked past some mob that was sitting on the street. And they watched me as I passed. And someone called out, "Morning, country." And I stopped. And my eyes lit up. And I turned to see who said it. It was their mob sitting there. And I turned back this way to see if they were talking to anyone else. And then there wasn't anyone, so I said, "Good morning." And they said, "We're not talking to you, we're talking to him." And I turned around, there was a kookaburra sitting in the tree. Good feeling was gone. No, of course, I'm just making a joke. They were talking to me. But compare that to the situation earlier this week. I got back on the weekend from Cairns and I was in Sydney getting my morning coffee to get through the day, and this random lady just comes up to me and felt the need to tell me that I look like Cat Stevens. I prefer to be called country, so. But today I'll be your MC, Murray of ceremony. I've got a few laughs, that's all right. Look, today we have actually a jam-packed agenda, speakers agenda with really qualified dignitaries. It's going to be a marathon run, so at the outset I wanted to ensure that we've only got limited time. So as each of the speakers come up, I want to just acknowledge that there are a lot of dignitaries in the room and there may not be time to do those proper technical acknowledgements, and I do apologize if that's the case. There's no disrespect intended. It's just that we have some really lovely people that have a message here today. So if that's missed, please, those politicians and dignitaries, please, we apologize in advance. Again, no disrespect is intended. All right. So where are we? In the agenda, I think we'll go then to the opening prayer by Mr. Fallen D. Passy, Chairman of Mayor Gedkem Le, Torres Strait Islanders Corporation, GBK Executive Member for Khmer Miriam Nation. You can go to the video, thank you.
My name is Fallen Passy from Marianne. I'm the chair for Mayor Gedkem Le Corporation. I will say opening prayer for everyone at that meeting. So, let us pray. Keriba Baba Kotorgi. Mama Umele Nalulam Kiba Atami Pi Kiale. Mama Eme Tutedari Nalu Ale Urutira Tonar. Kikem Tonar, Ale Kerker Tonar, Apako. Neru kerkere wataba kerbim. Kiba boy is no lemer kaknalu reconciliation. Yabi mirge, but kirbi tonarge peneru kainiki. Kirba tonar wabim kirbad karad. My meto asorda kirbai. Kirba kirinelam apako. Kirba boy is ike getge. Kirba mir mari maweso, kiribad. Mama Ibramarad, Mama Yosoterad, Mama Isaiah. Kiumele nalim mara present ike kirbido gele. Kirba mir mari maweso. Kirba michimpi ike kamari damsima. Wakabe mikai netide ale meeting yar sirdami. But Kramin Marima, our Sokarad, ask you through your Son, Jesus Christ, the Lord. Amen.
I'm honored to say a prayer for our breakfast in my language. So, let us pray. Our tat kaz maigimar. Yuda nibka kaib matkeda na unai dalina parno mabai galina daini taika unai dali kitayar ninu weniwen ninu maigimar kunkan palai ka ngal muga matkeda ninu zaget kai maika matkeda ngal muga gaitka but patai ka balbai gizi ina yang kudu tayang moino ninu Tulge occasionnel Yesu Keriso Taran Nel. Amen.
Amen. So, We will go to our first speaker. It's my great privilege to introduce Her Excellency, the Honourable Dr. Jeannette Young, PSM, Governor of Queensland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leon. Dame Quentin Bryce, Mr Speaker, the Honourable Curtis Pitt, all our many members of Parliament, the Reconciliation Queensland representatives, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I first would like to thank Shannon Rusker for his welcome to country, and I'd also like to acknowledge the original custodians of the land Brisbane is on, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and any First Nations people we have joining us here this morning. Reconciliation Week is exceptionally rich in significance and symbolic meaning for all of us. Today marks 24 years since that first sorry day, and a quarter of a century since publication of the landmark Bringing Them Home report into the government policies and practices that separated so many Indigenous children from their families. Tomorrow is the 55th anniversary of one of the most momentous milestones in Indigenous history in Australia, the referendum that saw more than 90% of Australians support the proposal to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the census. The following week, on the 3rd of June, we commemorate the day when the Australian High Court delivered the Mabo decision, which led to the legal recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as the traditional owners and custodians of lands and paved the way for native title. In more than half a century, there's been much positive change, but the choice of be brave, make change as the theme for this year's Reconciliation Week is clear evidence that all Australians, individuals, families, communities, organisations and governments, all of us, need to accept that there is still unfinished business that needs to be tackled. Every one of us is encouraged to support positive change by taking action in our daily lives, not just during Reconciliation Week, but on an ongoing basis, not just in our homes, but in our neighbourhoods and workplaces and in everything we do. It may be by learning more about our shared history. It may be by exploring the rich cultures of our first Australians. It may be by bravely speaking out when we hear inappropriate comments or see unjust actions. Whatever action we take, their hope is that we will do it bravely so that we can become a strong, reconciled nation and a just and equal society. As Governor, I am privileged to speak for all Queenslanders, and on their behalf, I'm now very pleased to launch Reconciliation Week 2022 and to thank the board and the staff of Reconciliation Queensland for their hard work and dedication as a peak body. They are a constant reminder to us that reconciliation is everybody's business. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like now to welcome the Honourable Curtis Pitt, Speaker of the House.
Thanks, Leon. Deadliest MC we've had by far. Can I firstly acknowledge that we are on the land of Aboriginal people, always was, always will be. I want to say, pay my respects to elders past and present and thank them for their careful custodianship of the land over countless generations. In Australia, we're very fortunate to have two of the world's oldest continuing living cultures in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, whose lands, winds and waters we all now share. My job today is a very easy one. It's to welcome you to the Queensland Parliament as Speaker. I want to say thank you to those people who are here, who've joined us. Thank you for getting up early. know it's a struggle, but I really do appreciate it. Of course, also those people who are joining us from regional and remote parts of Queensland via video link. I also, of course, want to acknowledge that today is National Sorry Day. We collectively should never forget the mistreatment of First Nations peoples and who were forcibly removed from their families, of course, became known as the Stolen Generations. As Speaker, though, I'm very proud to be hosting today's event in support of the cause of reconciliation here today. Of course, it is always about progress. It's not about what we've achieved, but where we're going to make further achievements. It's very important that we understand that reconciliation is an ongoing process. It's not something we draw a line in the sand on. It's something that we have to continue to do each and every day, not just during Reconciliation Week. I'm obviously very proud to be the Speaker of the Queensland Parliament, but particularly so because we are the first Parliament in Australia to have an Indigenous Liaison Officer in 2008, a position that continues today, and it's a very important position because it makes sure we understand our place and, of course, making sure that we engage appropriately. I'm also very pleased, as someone who's been a former Minister for Indigenous Affairs over a long, long time, to have been part of instituting the Ministerial Champions program. And I look around the room and I see a number of people here today, Cabinet Ministers, who I know personally and with their portfolio responsibilities are richer for that experience. They all have somebody they now know in a remote part of Queensland that they didn't know before. And what it does is brings collectively a really important conversation to the Cabinet table. It means that our Cabinet, our Board of Directors of Queensland, if you like, are the people who now have a better understanding about what it is like to live in a remote part of Queensland and to understand that. Obviously, the Queensland Parliament has also entered into a reconciliation action plan, and I thank Uncle Bill for the work that we did with him, and particularly I want to acknowledge George Hassanakos in my office, who has done terrific work in that space with broader people across the parliamentary service. Through the implementation of the Reconciliation Action Plan, we are looking at strategies for empowering First Nations people. It covers a whole range of areas, and that includes employment. And it's very important that we continue to focus on that. And I'm also very proud to be the Speaker of a Parliament where we have the first female Cabinet Minister as First Nations people in Leanne Enoch. I'm very pleased that we actually have Lance McCallum as our member for Bundamba, and of course very proud as a Far North Queensland parochial supporter that we have Cynthia Louis as the first Torres Strait Islander elected to any Parliament in Australia. So thank you very much for being here. Finally, we've already heard that there are too many dignitaries to mention, but I certainly want to pay my respects to Her Excellency. Your Excellency, thank you for being here. You've been a true champion for Queensland throughout the COVID response, but in your new role, and particularly because of the importance, I think, of making sure that our approach to responding to COVID affected Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people far more and could have been disastrous if it wasn't well kept. And so for that I say thank you. Welcome to the Queensland Parliament.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my privilege now to invite the Honourable Minister Craig Crawford, Minister for Seniors and Disabilities Services, Minister of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships.
Good morning, everyone. Can I begin by respectfully acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land of which we gather here today, where this event is taking place and where it's also being streamed to. Can I acknowledge elders past, present and emerging? Can I echo the words of Mr. Speaker, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Can I acknowledge Your Excellency, Mr. Speaker, Erin Lang, the CEO of Reconciliation Queensland, and your team, event sponsors, my parliamentary colleagues, the ministers, shadow ministers, opposition members, members of parliament. I know there's mayors in the room. We've got corporate partners, some of which you're hearing from as speakers. Everyone who has come together to recognise this significant occasion. I'm honoured to join you here today for the launch of National Reconciliation Week 2022. This week shines a light on the important work being done to advance reconciliation between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and non-Indigenous peoples in this country. The work of reconciliation is ongoing. It lives in our collective hearts, minds and spirits. It requires action from all of us, every day, in school, sport, business and of course government. By reflecting on the journey so far, we can look ahead to the future. We can recommit to actions that will bring about real and lasting change. Change that will create a more equitable Queensland, where every person is valued, cultures are nurtured, and a society is built on justice, unity and respect. Today is also National Sorry Day, where we acknowledge the trauma caused to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families and communities by the forced removal of their children and dispossession of their lands. I want to pay tribute to the enduring strength of stolen generation survivors. As I speak to you today, three words ring out: voice, treaty, truth. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's acceptance speech on Sunday opened with a full commitment to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. It was the... Yeah. It was the first victory speech by a PM to put First Nations people central to federal government policy. The first of three steps set out in the 2017 Uluru Statement from the Heart was voice. The other two are truth-telling and treaty. This moment in time is exciting for First Nations and non-Indigenous people because momentum is building. As we meet here today on this land, we meet at a turning point in our shared history, a history that has not always been voiced truthfully. Last week I visited the 1,200-strong Aboriginal community of Kawanyama on the Western Cape York, 600 kilometres by road west of Cairns. There, to my absolute amazement, I was shown one of the most remarkable and iconic collections of national truth-telling and cultural significance known as the Kawanyama Collection. Housed in an old demountable hut are secret and sacred items, ancient spears and fighting shields, and the weapons and chains used by pastoralists and native mounted police in the frontier wars of Cape York. In one corner, and you could feel a tangible presence in the room, were small cardboard boxes containing ancestral remains, skulls and bones that had been repatriated from museums for burial on country. I met 84-year-old elder Hazel Barr, who told of the living memory of her tribe of the massacre of almost an entire camp of women and children at Emu Lagoon. It was a reminder that frontier wars are not that distant in the past. Reconciliation is about unpacking the truth of our history and writing a new future for our state. A future where Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and non-Indigenous peoples work in partnership with mutual respect as equals. This year's theme of National Reconciliation Week challenges us to be brave and make change. Tomorrow is the 55th anniversary of the 1967 referendum which legally recognised the First Peoples of these lands for the first time. That recognition came about following years of campaigning by many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and advocacy groups. Today we're working towards new milestones on the journey towards reconciliation. The Palaszczuk government is progressing a path to treaty in partnership with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and I want to acknowledge some of our Treaty Advancement Committee members here today, Jackie Huggins and Josephine Byrne, who are with us this morning. We're fundamentally changing the way we work with Australia's First Nations people. We are engaging in ways based on mutual respect, but there is still a long way to go. I'm encouraged that every year hundreds of businesses, organisations and institutions are developing, extending and implementing their reconciliation action plans. I encourage each and every one of you to be brave and make the changes in your networks, in your communities and in your families that are needed to truly reconcile the darkness of our history to ensure a brighter shared future. In reflecting on this year's National Reconciliation Week theme, I again want to acknowledge the courage of the change makers who have come before us. That includes proud First Nations leaders like Eddie Mabo, who 30 years ago on the 3rd of June successfully secured the native title rights of his people in the High Court. He's brave, he challenged us as a nation, and he created lasting change that is paving the way for those coming through. We stand on your shoulders. You have built the foundation that supports us to make change today. As we observe National Reconciliation Week, on behalf of the Palaszczuk Government, I recommit to continuing that journey together with First Nations peoples, and I invite every Queenslander to be part of making change in our state as we travel on this path to treaty. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Crawford. My pleasure now to introduce Erin Lang, Chief Executive Officer of Reconciliation Queensland.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Erin Lang, and I am a Bundjalung woman on my dad's side, and I am of Irish and German descent on my mum's side. I was born and raised on Turrbal country, and as of January this year, I am the CEO of Reconciliation Queensland. When I first saw the role for the CEO of RQI advertised, I thought this role would be a great opportunity to educate people about what it's like to be a First Nations person in Australia today, especially as a fair-skinned Aboriginal woman. I find myself having to defend my identity and my culture on a regular basis because in some people's eyes, I am not black enough to be Aboriginal. I have spent the past 15 years working for a non-for-profit and community-controlled organisation whose focus has been on assisting First Nations people in areas such as homelessness, alcohol and substance misuse, diversionary programs, family and children's services, domestic violence, and education. These programs have been put in place to target what many people believe are the problems the First Nations people are struggling with. When I have been asked to sit on recruitment panels, these are all the things that candidates usually list when they are asked, do you understand what issues impact our First Nations people? In my experience, these issues seem to be the side effects of our unspoken shared history and the continued destruction of our culture. I have seen firsthand the struggles that First Nations people are experiencing because of systems and policies that are in place that keep First Nations people in a place of disadvantage. First Nations people are living with racism on a day-to-day basis, overrepresentation in child protection systems, high incarceration rates, lower life expectancies, and intergenerational trauma. About 7 years ago, I changed career paths and started working in native title space. I was again met with frustration. Here is a system apparently set up to empower First Nations people towards self-determination. However, what I experienced was that it left most groups divided and traumatised by the damage the native title process can have on the community. The prescribed body corporates managing what little native title rights they have received now have to do it in an environment of disdain and turmoil. Whilst I believe native title is a great step in the right direction, it isn't enough. This is why the pathway to treaty discussions are important. I see both of these as small elements of truth-telling that our nation needs. For me, the foundation of reconciliation is education and truth-telling. Until all Australia takes ownership of our nation's true history, many will struggle to empathise with the lived experiences of First Nations people today. It is important to recognise that there are many services and people out there that are trying to make a difference. It is important for our leaders and our decision makers to be brave and make change and try something different. This might be something as simple as asking for help and co-designing policies with the very people who the policies will impact. In closing, I'd like to ask everyone here today, especially our leaders and those who are in a position of power, to pause and consider before making future decisions, will this decision move us towards a reconciled future? I would like to thank our supporters, sponsors, and most importantly, I could not have made today happen without the help of the volunteers within RQ and the Parliament House staff, such as the RAP working group, and the huge amount of support I've had from the events team. We have some fantastic speakers to come who I know will challenge you, and I ask that you listen with an open mind and an open heart. I hope you enjoy your breakfast. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Before I introduce the next speaker, I should have mentioned earlier on, Parliament's sitting at the moment, so our members of Parliament may have to excuse themselves to fulfil, obviously, their parliamentary duties, so I just thought I'd give everybody the heads up. The next speaker is the owner of First Nations People Consultancy, founder and executive past on the Fire Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Corporation. He's on the advisory group on young people in detention, and on the Queensland Police Service First Nations reference group. Deadly fella, my brother, Sammy Leone.
Thank you, Brother Leon is deadly comedian, I thought he was going to do a stand-up, but I might challenge him here, I might challenge you. Gulum Gujali. I'm a Garawa bachelor man, so Garawa's from the Gulf of Carpentaria, and my grandfather got removed from there with all of the policies, stolen generation stuff got removed. Bachelor on my grandmother's side got removed from her country, and Bachelor's Gari. Gari was formerly known as Fraser Island, but we got our name back, so I'm very proud of that, and it's a big moment for us. And people had to be brave there to get that change. Also have to acknowledge, just quickly, I know acknowledgements were done, but I've got to acknowledge some of my elders here, Auntie Jackie Huggins. I was invited to speak here today by Auntie Jackie, and when our elders and that speak, it's your invitation, but if I didn't turn up, there'd be consequences. So got to acknowledge, and my Auntie Denise Proud at the back there. My mother grew up in Cherbourg community under a lot of the act and that our aunties and our families have been through, so got to acknowledge them. Be brave, make change. National Reconciliation Week is about acknowledging the past. Great milestones for our people: the 1967 referendum, the Mabo decision. These are both iconic moments for the First People and also their nations. I now speak not in disrespect, but to provide an understanding of the contributions that in some form may have inadvertently been mitigating factors to these exemplary milestones within our history. Some of these, I'll just state: 1925, Australian Aboriginal Progressive Association was formed. 1936, the maritime strike in the Torres Strait Islands. 1937, we had the Aborigines Progressive Association that was formed. 1938, the Day of Mourning. Big historical moment, Cumragunya walk-off. The Pilbara strike in 46, Lake Nash cattle station walk-off. In 57, we had the formation of NADOC, which was later NADOC, to include our Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters. 1957, we had the Palm Island strikes, unfair wages and apartheid. They had a strike about that. In 62, the Commonwealth Electoral Act was amended to give Aboriginal people the right to vote. These are just a few of the examples. There's many more moments in history that I'd somewhat like to imagine, and they had impact, I believe, in National Reconciliation Week today as we know it. Be brave and make change. Our trailblazers, our old people, they had to be brave. They had to make a stand for us today as people. as First Nations people, as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. They had to fight for what's right, they had to be brave and to make change. So now I'm going to be a little bit brave today, and I'm going to call on everyone present here in positions of power, all right, and also our elders in our communities and everyone to stand with us. And I say that in respect to my elders because I stand beside them. They lead the way. I'm only here as a man, but I respect my elders, so no disrespect. I've got one bit here. I know we're running on a tight schedule, so I'll make it a bit quicker here. The Royal Commission into Black Deaths in Custody. That was a big moment for us, eh? We had that. What's happened since then? Well, since then, there have now been at least 495 Indigenous deaths in custody in the last 30 years since the findings from the Royal Commission. They were handed in 1991, and my own family, my own kin, are still dying in prison cells. Not on. Close the Gap campaign. It's been roughly around here for 10 years. And now it's encouraging. You know, they've identified those health determinants, low health determinants for our people. And it was encouraging when they brought the initiatives in for closing the gap. You know, we can go there, get medical health when we need that, but I'm not in the health profession. I don't think there's, you know, we're still losing our elders and our family members. It seems to me more than ever. Health, very bad. They brought the new National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Plan 2021 to 2031. So let's get behind this, eh? I'm not selling health here. I don't even, you know, I know people within health, but I just did a little bit of research myself and looked into some talking points to bring forward today. There are a couple of examples, but one key one is the Bringing Them Home report from 1997, and you know, the National Inquiry into the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families. My family, I'm a direct descendant of the impacts of that stuff. A response came from this, from the Healing Foundation, and they had recommendations for the Making Healing Happen report in June 2021, but they need to be supported in enacting these recommendations and need the governments, we need the business, and we need the mainstream community to buy into such initiatives for change for our mob. This is not to mention employment, education, home ownership, and the list goes on. In ending now, my challenge now is to our young people, to our governments, to our sectors, our communities, and to all of our allies here today. What can you do in the spirit of reconciliation to be that change? Be brave and make change.
Thank you, Brother Sammy. We go to Mr. Ned David, or Uncle Ned, Chair of Magani Lagal Torres Strait Islanders Corporation, Chair and GBK Executive Member of Kulkalgal Nation.
Dividi Mobin, Kapu Bailud, Kapu Batainga, Kapu Migi Batainga, Nitamura. Morning, everyone. I first acknowledge the opening prayer. I was so married to Uncle Fallon Passy. I acknowledge elders who are present here today for this special event. I acknowledge the presence of Premier Palaszczuk, ministers, members of the Queensland Parliament. I'd like to make a special mention for the 3 First Nations members of the Queensland Parliament. Minister Leanne Enoch, member for Bandamba, Lance McCallum, and of course, a member for our region, Cook, Cynthia Louis. I want to express my mina big yeso to Speaker of the House, Curtis Pitt, for once again co-hosting this event with Reconciliation Queensland, and of course express my mina big yeso to Erin, the CEO, for giving me this incredible privilege to address what is a very special day on the calendar for Queenslanders, Australians, both First Nations and non-Indigenous members of this great country of ours. This day, for a lot of us, is incredibly significant. With the way things are in the world, the amount of distractions that one can have, many things can go missing. This day gives us an opportunity to focus on something that is incredibly special for the history of this country. All the wrongs, all the injustices that have been done to the First Nations of this great country. It gives us an opportunity to have a look and reflect on these practices, but more importantly, it gives us an opportunity to start, to continue, to do the healing that is required. It's important for people who are in positions of influence, members of Parliament, members of First Nation groups who are leaders, to ensure that at the forefront of everything that they consider that they do, whether it is amending legislation, considering reforms, how you build relationships with people, we must ensure that we do things in such a way where we don't contribute to what has happened before. We don't forget these things. It's all part of the greater process of reconciliation. This day gives us this incredible time to come together, build those relationships, and do those little things that contribute to the sort of positive outcomes that we want across a range of things that impact or are impacting on First Nations people in this country. From a GBK perspective, from Guru Aboriginal, the Sea and Land Council of the Torres Strait, we stand together with all our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, all our First Nations brothers and sisters across Queensland, across the country, and we join in heart and mind with the Parliament of Queensland to do all those things that we have to in our time as leaders to make positive changes for our people, marking this day and moving forward. Once again, I ask everybody for this chance, this opportunity to address everyone at this day today. I ask you to reflect on it, and I ask you please that you leave with what I think about and talk about all the time. Tabukiri maigi, never speak about the bad heart. Eso.
So, Uncle Ned. Next we have researcher, School of Political Science and International Studies, the University of Queensland, former Treaty Advancement Committee member, Dr. Josephine Byrne.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. Like my Bolaned there said, I'd like to acknowledge the opening prayer by Uncle Fallon Passy there, Uncle Palen, and also acknowledge honour and glory to God and also to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders who continue to hold our communities together after all that we've been through. I want to start by talking about my community of Townsville, that I was born there on the lands of the Walgarikaban, Birigaba peoples and the Bindal peoples in that area. And in Townsville, we have a lot of Indigenous faith-based as well as cultural leaders. But they need resources to support families and young people in crisis and support our people who get out of prison that need to have a transition period before they go back into independent living or either back into their families. And two elders that really inspire me, I mean, there are many elders that inspire me, but two elders I want to mention here today is Auntie Valerie Lanoy and her husband, Uncle William Lanoy. And they've been working with the courts for the past 5 years in youth justice and 2 years voluntary, and they've started to receive some sort of nominal fee for their service. They share with me that elders don't feel valued because they're not remunerated or compensated for the service they provide to youth justice system. And we are a people that do things out of love and compassion for our own people. But we're living in two worlds. We live in two worlds now. That has to be acknowledged in the way Indigenous people are engaged in doing this work together with all of you civic leaders as well as parliamentarians. These things need to be considered. And this is about respect. It is about respect for not just our elders, but all of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who walk a hard road to get education in the Western system and still hold on to who we are while we do this work with all of you. So that has to be acknowledged, that respect has to be there in everything we do moving forward. I also want to share with you, I have many yarns with my Auntie Abigail Harry on Thursday Island, and she often talks to me about the policy and programs that need to be more responsive to the circumstances of our people. She often says, just because it's doable doesn't mean it's workable. And that has been the experience of Indigenous people for a very long time. You know, we go out of our way, or our people are required to go out of their way to even access these services, especially in remote communities, but also in regional centres as well, and I would say also in the metropolitan centres. And so, you know, this is work that we've got to all of us have to get better at, from Parliament right down to the coalface. And so, for me, selfhood is the foundation of reconciliation. It's about finding out about who you are as an individual, and it's about all of us here getting to know ourselves. That's a hard thing to do. It's the journey of every human being. But reconciliation, if we're really up for it, we're going to do that work. So there are many acts of reconciliation I want to briefly mention around particularly the process of treaty making and that what's required for that coming together to do that treaty making. So as we've mentioned, the work that I did with Dr. Jackie Huggins and also the Honourable Quinton Bryce and also Brother Leon, travelling around the state and listening to our people and what was important to them consistently. And I was also involved in the Referendum Council's work on the Uluru Statement. I got to go to 10 of the regional dialogues, and consistently this need for historical truth-telling continues to come up. But what we heard in the treaty work was another side too, was we need to do this with care because of the trauma, because of the intergenerational trauma. So we need to be mindful when we start that work, that no doubt will be a multi-pronged approach from the discussions that we've had so far, implemented both at the institutional and community level. The second thing is non-Indigenous leaders need to be role models of fearlessness in raising awareness about historical truth. So our young people need those role models. I have students at UQ, I had students at Macquarie University before that. These are millennials. I'm getting to know them. They are eager. They are saying, this is horrible what you're telling us, what happened here. Like, what can we do? And what's so great now is I can say, go and support the Uluru Statement work, be behind the treaty work. The work for all of us is to be part of the dialogue, to be part of the public discourse, but on the everyday, be part of the dialogue, wherever that is, in your family, at your own dinner table, at your workplace. That's where the courage comes. Are you willing to talk back? And because of what's in front of us now, and we have a leader who said and put central First Nations issue or settling things with First Nations, this is the time. This is the time for the courage. The third thing is Indigenous nation building, which no doubt all of you will learn more about as we continue to do the treaty making work. This is all stuff we'll continue to talk about. And this is about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people reclaiming who we are and restoring our sense of self on our terms after the disruption created through reserves, missions and other forms of forced assimilation. I want to leave you all with a well-known quote from celebrated poet Maya Angelou and civil rights activist. Courage is the most important of all virtues because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. You can practice any virtue erratically, but nothing consistently without courage. So there's one other thing I just remembered. Pat Anderson, a brilliant Aboriginal leader, when we often went around to the regional dialogue, she said to everybody, look, if we ever get to the stage where we have a government that's brave enough and courageous enough to take this on and lead, brace yourself, because it's going to get a bit ugly. But that's where I say each and every one of you in this room, in all of us, my students, these young generations that are ready to go, participate in that dialogue in your everyday life, everywhere where you are. Talk back to it and bring knowledge to it. So we're not going to be scared of ignorance anymore. We're going to address it. Thank you, everybody. Eso.
Eso, Sister Josephine. Next, we'll hear from the Chair of Kaiureg Aboriginal Native Title Corporation, GBK Executive Member for the Kaiwalagal Kaiureg Aboriginal Nation, Mr. Milton Savage.
My understanding of reconciliation, reconciliation is one of the best thing that ever happened in this country. It's about giving recognition to understand each other, and to do that it takes a lot of practice, takes a lot of commitment, getting involved and actually doing it. So coming together to understand the meaning of reconciliation is so important. It's like my interpretation of understanding the misunderstanding, like in darkness. When God created this universe, He said, let there be light, and there was light. So even in darkness, there is light. You have moonlight, you have starlight. You can still see, you can still walk, you can still travel. And in the day, you have the sunlight. So there was light. But the interpretation of darkness is your own ignorance. And to understand the ignorance, you have to have light. And the universal light is Jesus Christ. So to have that kingdom mentality to understand darkness and light, that's what people need, to sit down together and to talk about these things. So it is very, very important, and that's how I see reconciliation. To reconcile with one another and be open. When men meet men, you gotta hug this way, heart to heart. Not this way, but this way, heart to heart. It makes you understand, it gives you peace, knowledge and understanding about reconciliation, what it means.
to Mr. Savage, or Atasika as I know him, Diddley Kaure Gelder. We're at a part of the program, we only have a few speakers to go, but again, as I mentioned earlier, it is a sitting, Parliament sitting at the moment, so if any of our parliamentarians need to duck off, probably now might be an opportunity. I'm not sure if Her Excellency needs to leave, I believe so. So that being the case, ladies and gentlemen, please stand as the Governor of Queensland, Her Excellency, the Honourable Dr. Jeannette Young, PSM, leaves. Thank you. You may be seated. So we're just over halfway. It was a marathon speaker series. It's the closest I'll ever get to a marathon, God willing. Our next speaker is, who have we got as our next speaker? After Atasika, it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Ray Rosendale, who is a Community Services Officer, First Peoples Community Development, Community Sport and Cultural Services from Cairns Regional Council.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the traditional custodians for their welcome and I acknowledge their ongoing physical and spiritual connection to these lands. My name is Ray Rosendale. I'm a Guyalunji man, the Western Sunset people. My traditional lands are northwest of Cairns in far north Queensland. I'm also a descendant of Danish, English and German immigrants. I'm extremely proud of my heritage and I feel it is a reflection of an inclusive blending of cultures. This morning we're here to commence National Reconciliation Week 2022 with its theme of Be Brave, Make Change. This theme at this time has, I believe, become more important and more relevant than anyone knew when it was chosen. Reconciliation is often misunderstood, and many people, particularly those who are not engaged in the reconciliation journey, but not always, even those who are engaged can misunderstand what reconciliation is at its simplest. It isn't, at its very essence, a difficult concept. The Oxford Dictionary defines it as an end to disagreement, the process of making it possible for two different sides or arguments to exist together without being opposed to each other. I feel that we can take that further. As Australians, allowing ourselves to hear and understand the views of others, not necessarily changing each other's minds, but allowing ourselves to hear what drives someone else's paradigm, to understand what they believe. Why do they do what they do? What is it that is important to them? And what may not be? How it makes them feel and what they believe needs to be done to make things better. We may still not agree with each other, but we know that it is what it is that drives that other person, and hopefully that kernel of understanding can lead to real growth. To me, that is the very first and simplest tenet of reconciliation. The nation, our people, have made great strides towards a better Australia. Our predecessors argued, fought, and negotiated many changes that affect us today, moving barriers to both individual and community advancement. The changes, such as the removal of the colour bar from the military in 1949, brought about by the selflessness of First Peoples veterans, their comrades in arms, and the realisation by a grateful nation that they served with honour. The changes to the voting laws, which slowly changed around the country, as the realisation struck that good citizens can come from every background. The referendum in 1967 that showed how strong we are when we work together for the common good and the betterment of us all. These things and many others have changed our nation, but we still have a long and arduous journey ahead. There have been and continue to be numerous traps and failings in our reconciliation journey, and this is something that we must constantly remind ourselves of. We must not allow the failings in policy or implementation, or even of will, to prevent the advancement of reconciliation. I will not be speaking more about these today, as I believe we know when we can do better, and that the collective ability of our nation can overcome these if we're careful. I recently read Bronwyn Fredericks, the Pro Vice-Chancellor at UQ, saying that you can't keep doing acknowledgements to country. Welcome to country, or having Aboriginal art in the boardrooms, on the walls, wearing Aboriginal art in logos, in uniforms, and then not engaging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the very rooms that are making decisions. We've become very adept at doing certain things, but we seem to have stopped at an apparently inexplicable barrier to further progress. I look around our nation today and it's heartwarming to see so many organisations, corporations, government departments and agencies who are rightly proud and fortunate to have First Peoples cultural advisors who assist them to make better, culturally sound, community-driven changes to their workplace, their workforces, policies and practices. What disappoints me is when I look closer. I see that in most cases, these advisory positions are outside the boardroom, just below the chain of command, there to advise the decision makers, but not actually integral as decision makers themselves. I wonder why these highly capable, intelligent people are not in senior management and do not have that all-important seat at the boardroom table or are not the CEO of those organisations. We seem very able to do this in First Peoples organisations, but very rarely in those positions in government and business that are not dedicated First Peoples organisations. This is why I mentioned earlier that this year's NRW theme was so apt. It is time. It is time for you, the decision makers, to be brave, to make change. That change is to look at why this is so. What is it that is preventing these valued members of your staff from advancing to a seat at the decision-making table? Australia seems to be very competent at the attraction and recruitment of First Peoples, but particularly weak at retention and promotion. It's disingenuous to think that we could go to great trouble to attract and then recruit fantastic people, but then we don't strive to develop their long-term retention through education and promotion with a view to developing them towards senior management. There have been some very recent studies that support my assertions, and that is indeed troubling. We can and should be doing better. This then is my call to arms to you today, to take a deep and introspective look at your organisation and identify why this seemingly impermeable barrier is so prevalent. And then it is you, as the leaders, what can you do about resolving this and ensuring that there is no more barriers? It is your challenge and your responsibility to be brave today, to make change today. Not discuss it interminably, find reasons not to change or allow bias, both unintentional and deliberate, to stop you bringing about that change. It is only by removing these barriers through real action that we will see those talented people step forward with confidence, knowing that they are valued, that their skills, knowledge and abilities are not only utilised outside the boardroom, but are vital to the advancement of the organisation as a senior leader making decisions for all Australians. We can be brave. We can make change. This is really what the theme of NRW 2022 speaks to. But it only makes sense if we do it together, for the benefit of all. I challenge you in the positions of leadership that when you return to your offices, your committees and your boardrooms today, to consider these words. Be brave. Make change. Do it today. Now. For all of us, together. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Ray. We've got 4 more speakers. This event would not have been possible without BHP as a sponsor. So it's with great pleasure I introduce Mr. Dominic Nolan, Head of Corporate Affairs, Queensland, New South Wales, BHP, and there will be a video shortly after from Luana Walsh, Chairperson of Brada Bana Aboriginal Corporation. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Leon, and I will accept your kind invitation to streamline acknowledgement of all of our dignitaries here today, except to say thank you, everybody, and to all special guests for being here. And we are all very special guests. You are all very special guests, and it's wonderful to be with you here this morning. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we meet on today, and to thank you for your welcome this morning and for that wonderful smoking ceremony as we arrived into the building. And also to acknowledge that as a business, as a company, BHP operates globally on the lands of First Nations people. We are very privileged to be able to do that. And we also recognise with that privilege comes a very real responsibility and very real obligation. And we have commitments. We've got written commitments, public commitments, including through things like our Reconciliation Action Plan. We are currently writing our 6th Reconciliation Action Plan with traditional owners across Australia to make sure that it's meaningful and it reflects real ambition and real striving for change through our actions. But what I would say is that these commitments are meaningless. Written down and public commitments are meaningless if they don't translate to real and tangible results. And as Leon mentioned, Luana is going to be speaking through a short video shortly. The original plan was for Luana to be here on the stage with me this morning, and we really just wanted to have a bit of a conversation, a bit of a discussion about some of the work that we've done together. Luana, as the chairperson of the Brada Bana Aboriginal Corporation, the board, and the work that we've done with Brada Bana, with Luana and with the board over the last few years, and to talk about some of what I hope Luana would agree, translating those commitments into genuine and tangible actions and results on the ground. Most of the BMA operations in Queensland are on Brada Bana country in the Bowen Basin, and it's through relationship and through trust that we've been able to work together over the last short few years, really, and I believe that we've made some genuine progress working together. I know that I've learnt a lot personally. I'm grateful for the opportunity of working with Luana and the board of Brada Bana and other traditional owners across our operations to hear their stories and their history. And some of that has been very difficult to hear. And some of it has been wonderful to hear the stories of the past. What I'm sure about is that if Luana was here this morning and we were having the conversation, in acknowledging the relationship and the trust, she would also be very clear and be holding me and BHP to account that we've got a lot more work to do. I think BHP is better today than we were 3 or 4 years ago, but I also acknowledge that we've got to be better next year. We've got to be better again in 5 years' time. And that if we're able to continue to work with people like the board of Brada Bana, other traditional owners on the lands that we operate, and work together with respect and with relationship, then we will continue to get better together. This year's Reconciliation Week theme is a call to action for all of us, for our governments, organisations, communities, each and every one of us, to be brave and address unfinished business of reconciliation so that we can make change for the benefit of all Australians. That call from action is coming from all parts of society and community, from investors, from governments, and most importantly, from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, families, leaders, communities. Brave reconciliation looks like meaningful actions that come from working together, and those meaningful actions deliver real results. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, BHP. We have two more. We have a video now, don't we? Is it on? I mean, is it playing? Okay, sorry. Jumping the gun.
Good morning, my name is Luana Walsh and I'm the chairperson of Barada Barna Aboriginal Corporation. I'm joined with Timothy Knox from BHP and we're here to talk about Reconciliation Week. Timothy.
So Luana, what does reconciliation mean to you and the Barada Barna people?
Reconciliation means a lot to my people. It's about learning to come together and to work together as one people of Australia, which hasn't happened in the past, and so where we are now with it, I believe we're building to a better future, especially for the next generations to come.
And this year's theme, Be Brave, Make Change, what does that mean to you and your people?
That quote means to me that if, you've got to learn to stand up and have the courage to say when something's not right, whether it be everyday life, when dealing with each other, black and white. We've got to learn to stand up for each other. If you're being disrespected and I see you're being disrespected, I'm going to stand up for you. And that takes a lot of courage because not a lot of people have that courage to stand up.
And working with BHP over a number of years, Barada Barna people have been very brave to engage with BHP. What have you noticed over the last few years in relation to reconciliation and working together?
I would say in the last 3 to 4 years, the relationship with BHP, it's grown immensely. There's a lot of respect that's come out of it from our relationship, and it shows in everything out here in the culture of the mining industry. So previous to that, there wasn't much of a relationship, but now I can honestly stand here and say that our relationship is wonderful. It's built on mutual respect and honesty and integrity.
Thanks very much, Luana, for providing some insight from the Barada Barna people and from BHP, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day. Enjoy.
To Dominic and Ani, Luana Walsh there, chairperson of Barada Barna Aboriginal Corporation. And a small shout out to Isaac Regional Council and everybody joining from out that way. Spent some time out on Barada Barna country, very grateful. Next we have our co-chairs, Danielle Abu, the Indigenous co-chair of Reconciliation Queensland, and Alex Hanlon, the Reconciliation Queensland non-Indigenous co-chair. Please welcome them.
Thank you, Leon. Debe good morning. I would like to acknowledge and thank Tribal Experience Dance Group for welcoming us to country today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. My name is Danielle Abu and I am a proud Torres Strait Islander woman. I was born and raised on Thursday Island with bloodlines to Mer, Arab and Boigu Islands. I relocated to Brisbane after graduating from Thursday Island State High to attend university, and since have completed a bachelor's and master's degree. To fulfill my passion to be part of positive imagery for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, I decided to work for an Indigenous-owned creative agency, and I was there for many years. However, in recent times, I have now changed careers to accounting. A crazy change, everyone tells me, but I absolutely love it. I stand here today proud of the person I have become, and I give all the credit to my family, especially my mother, to my friends and my community. It is with great honor that I hold the position of Indigenous Co-Chair of Reconciliation Queensland, and I would like to thank all of you here and online for being part of our reconciliation journey. Elders before me have fought hard for constitutional rights, recognition, and equality. I would like to thank them for what they have achieved. I would also like to acknowledge those from Reconciliation Queensland here today who have paved the way for me, and I stand here today to continue that journey. 2022 marks the 30-year anniversary of the historical Mabo case and the successful efforts to overturn the legal fiction of terra nullius. This was one of the most significant turning points for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the fight for not only native title, but also recognition. This year for my people also marks the 30-year anniversary of the Torres Strait flag, designed by the late Bernard Namok Sr. The flag symbolizes the unity and identity of all Torres Strait Islanders. What a momentous year of celebration for the Torres Strait. So what does a reconciled Australia look like to me? At its core, it is a point in time when Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are healed and finally have cultural and spiritual freedom. It is a point in time when young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people feel safe to be proud of their identity. It is a point in time in a forward-looking and fair-minded Australia where the validity and attributes of Indigenous cultures are rightfully and automatically acknowledged, honoured, and fully integrated into our national character. I am extremely passionate about the empowerment of our youth, our future leaders and future keepers of our cultural knowledge. Youth from remote areas and low socioeconomic backgrounds continue to experience educational disadvantage. Educational outcomes for Indigenous children are substantially behind those of other students. The Queensland Government must support all young Australians to achieve not only equality of opportunity, but also more equitable outcomes. More must be done to address learning opportunities for Indigenous youth, especially those living in remote communities. As co-chair of Reconciliation Queensland, I aspire to create generational change by raising more awareness to the reconciliation movement. I will help to build a safer and more supportive Queensland for young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. As this year's theme states, be brave, make change. The momentum is here now, and we need you through truth-telling, education, and awareness to support the Uluru Statement from the Heart. A reconciled Australia is when we have a voice and have power over our destiny. A reconciled Australia is when we have constitutional recognition. A reconciled Australia is when our rights as First Nations peoples are not just respected, but celebrated in unity. We cannot achieve reconciliation on our own. Reconciliation can only be achieved in solidarity together. Awaswau, thank you.
Good morning. I realise I'm the only thing standing between you and some networking, so I'm going to be short. Thank you for such a generous welcome to country this morning, and to all of you distinguished guests. My name is Alex Hanlon. I'm of Northern Irish heritage. I was born on Garoonda lands, raised on Gadigal lands in Sydney, and recently returned from the lands of Ngai Tuahuriri in Otatihi, Christchurch, where I've been running an earthquake recovery. I'm now a small business owner here, a mediator and board director, wife to Sean, mother and stepmother to 3 man cubs, and staff to a West Highland White Terrier. There are many, many thanks that we need to make on such a day as this. However, this event just wouldn't have been possible without our friends from BHP, so thank you, BHP, for your ongoing support. To the Speaker of the House and our parliamentary RAP team, Thank you for toiling so hard to bring this event together and for hosting it here at your house. To Yarn, Cultural Edge Design, Cultural Grounding, Video Data Staging and Hire, the Parliamentary Venue and Catering teams, thank you for your contributions to support this event. To Reconciliation Queensland's patrons, Dame Quentin Bryce and Jackie Huggins, thank you so much for your resolute support of this journey that we are all on. To the Management Committee, our membership and our volunteers who have worked towards this event for many, many months now, thank you for your energy and for your persistence. We've grown this year's event from last year. All that hard yakka that had gone before us, we truly, truly stand on the shoulders of giants. To the speakers here today who have shared their truth, their culture with us and challenged us to in our thinking and how we see the world, thank you for challenging us to do better. The truth is an important lesson and it must be heard. We're deeply grateful that you have all decided to spend your time here today with us, and we thank you for the travel that you've done to get here and for your contribution. I particularly want to thank Erin Lang, Reconciliation Queensland CEO, Daniel Arbu, my co-chair, and Linda Hartnett, who is around somewhere. She's our company secretary. It's a pleasure and a privilege for me to be working with such inspiring leadership as these women. Each of them brings a very personal passion and experience to the work that they do. Each of them has worked some extremely long hours to get us today to this point of connection. And I know that Linda won't mind me saying that we're so very reassured by the energy of our young leaders with Danielle and with Erin. So Erin and Danielle, your energy and your enthusiasm gives us much hope. Thank you also to my ex-co-chair, Leon Filewood, who I think you will agree was rather a magnificent master of ceremonies this morning. Thank you, Leon. And thank you for flying up from Sydney to kind of keep us all on track, which is obviously a very gargantuan task given the size of our program here this morning. And of course, on behalf of Reconciliation Queensland, I would like to thank all of you who are here today for taking the time to be here, whether physically or virtually. It's really, really good to see you all. You are our partners. You've invested your time in reconciliation action plans, and we celebrate your work. And if this is your first RAP, we welcome you to the reconciliation movement. Like you, I care about a better, healthier and stronger community, just and equitable, peaceful and prosperous for all peoples, and especially for our First Nations peoples. The risk of a reconciliation action plan, of course, is that it becomes yet another business report. That with the best of intentions that once done, it sits on a shelf and is forgotten. That it becomes an activity that us non-First Nations folk do to tick a box and to look and feel like we're doing something, but without it ever really pushing ourselves to reach that moment where our organisations start to think differently, to do differently, and to be differently. Be brave, make change. The risk of a RAP is that it remains on the fringes of what our core business is. That you see the RAP, you launch the RAP, you monitor the tasks in the RAP without it ever letting it into your core business. I think Ray called it the seat at the table a little earlier. So be brave, make that change. I want to urge you all to take it that step further and to let it change you. This world no longer needs disinterested, unkind, absent and indifferent leadership, and I know that you know this. I know that you understand that reconciliation needs you to actively and persistently engage with dismantling corporate and government structures that promulgate racial divide. Reconciliation Queensland stands ready to support you in this mission. You've joined the reconciliation journey, and I'm very proud of you all. I know I probably sound a bit like your mum when I say that, but I'm genuinely very proud to be standing in a room full of people who have actually made that commitment and have started that pathway forward. So I really can't wait to see what you do next. In closing, I thank you sincerely for your support here today. I look forward to our continued partnership as we lift one another up and build a prosperous and happy future for us all. Thank you for coming, and please enjoy the hospitality and networking.
Thank you, Danielle and Alex. That's pretty much the end of the program today. We'll have a short video shortly from Mr. Keith Pabai, Deputy Chair of Maluki Torres Strait Islanders Corporation and GBK Executive Member for Gadal Malulgal, I'm going to get in trouble for getting that wrong, Nation. I just want to say thank you for coming again today. On the way out, there's some mugs, cups. Yep, no, I got that one, all right. But please, Reconciliation Queensland, obviously new branding, so we're very proud of that, and we hope that you enjoy the new branding as well. So please take a cup as you leave. For those on the other level, in the other room, please come down to this level to do some networking after this event. Again, Mina Bigeso, very big thank you to you all for attending here. Again, and acknowledge all the people that have come out. We'll go to the prayer and then, safe trip home and be brave, make change. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Want to welcome everyone here this morning for giving me this opportunity to briefly give you some explanation of what I'm about to say. My name is Keith Pabai. I'm the executive member for GBK, Gur Abradara Code. This morning I want to share with you some of the protocols that we have for our gatherings, especially when we come together as for gathering and we have to say grace or bless the food. So that's our protocol. I want to acknowledge the other members who have actually spoken before me to give you some explanation of what we do when we come together in our culture. So I'm going to now say a closing prayer in my language, Kalakawaya. It's a top Western Island Torres Strait language. So I'm going to bow my head. I'm going to ask everyone to bow your heads and we'll pray, do the closing prayer. Let us pray. Augatati gimalda para lak nel talan ni mulai kulai wagel ngawir gud matamis. Ni kai kulai wagel wada wadagam. Inabi garawai damai ngul padai ni dar. Ni mulai matai keda mulai ngul pagai gil mi sei wagel nuripa. Ina nabi garawai damai nginu getan wanan. Ni kai ngemunia kai amal kai sinada gimal. Ita nabi garawai damai ngul pagai ni be yude nginu wona bapa. Rit pala ngul pama bapa. Kaimil mabapa. Ngai nabi tunar garoi damis ni mulai mata ni keda kai augat. Yesu keriso. Ngai ni bi yudis ita aide. Dai ni damai kai rit pali mengi mu gamo pa. Wariga mabapa rit palai pa. Wakai kan mama babati dai. Mamula kinu ni eltaran Yesu keriso kai augat. I ngaru. Amen.
Concludes today. Thank you very much. Stick around for some networking. I think we've got the room until 10, so please take advantage.
This National Reconciliation Week, be strong, be determined, be proud, be bold. Be the difference. So together, we can make a more just, equitable and reconciled Australia. This National Reconciliation Week. Be brave. Make change.
congratulate that young man. Oh, whatever. Get a photo.
Are we all? Oh, we got to move over there.
We're probably going to make the next three announcements in the next month or two. Yeah, that might work out really well. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, so anyway, and the one is incredible that they're able to about 6 o'clock last night. Yeah, but then ad-lib, turn around video, I think that was great. Hello, Dominic. Right. Very good. I didn't hear your name referenced. Right. It was great. So I was here last year. I think last year was the first one. I'm mindful that there is a long list of speakers.